Welcome to the first in a three-part series in a new virtual conference for the 2020 Deer Industry Conference. My apologies. Held across the web right now on YouTube, Facebook and the DINS website. I'm Sarah Perriam and I'm delighted to be your MC for these interactive live streamed sessions, as well as our production team handling the broadcast across the next 3 Tuesdays, all from 1 o'clock. Now, each session is going to run between an hour to 90 minutes, and they are being recorded. So if you do tend to miss any of them, don't panic. Or if you see something interesting that you'd like to share with your team, they are going to be made on demand, available within a few days on the Deer Industry New Zealand YouTube channel. And the Deer Industry New Zealand, you may not know, has a podcast. All of the presentations from the 2019 conference are also on there as well. Now, this is an interactive conference, and I want to test out the chat functionality, of which I have here on my laptop all the comment sections on the Deer Industry YouTube channel and the Deer Industry Facebook page, so that we can take your comments and questions, as well as, of course, if you're watching on the Deer Industry, deernz.org website, there is a Q&A tab just above this player. So please feel free. This is all about the questions that you want to put to the members of the Deer Industry New Zealand organisation and our guests, discussing many things throughout these 3 sessions across the next 3 Tuesdays. So let's test out to see if your fingers are working. I want to see, basically go into the comments, really simple. This is something that I know you'll all know. What is your name and where are you watching from? I just want to get a really good sense of the community that is watching with us online. And for those of you who do know, I have been involved with the Deer Industry Conference for 6 years now, so I'll recognise a lot of familiar faces, those of which I've had a beer or two with. It's important that you all know that this is live and interactive, and your feedback and questions will be put to our presenters today following their 10-minute presentations. So if you don't ask, I will. So please do not leave me hanging. Now, on the first session in the 3-part series, we have the following schedule for you over the next hour and a half. New to the CEO position for Deer Industry New Zealand is Innes Moffat, and he will provide us with his views on DINS's activities that support the industry through what has been volatile times. That will be after 1:20 p.m. And following that, as I said, live Q&A with Innes, so put your questions to him in the comments below or above, again in that Q&A section on the website. After 1:40, the NZDFA, that's the Deer Farmers Association, continues to serve all New Zealand deer farmers well. We're going to be joined by Producer Manager for Deer Industry New Zealand, Tony Pearce, sharing his thoughts on priorities for deer farmers and how the NZDFA's activities are representing members' interests on deer productivity, environmental stewardship and the business of deer farming. Again, your thoughts for Tony in the questions comment section below or above. You've heard that selecting sires for Carla improves growth rates. Now, tune in after 2 o'clock and we're going to be joined by Dr. Jamie Ward, who is a farm systems scientist for ag research, discussing the effects of Carla on the worm infection cycle and dollars that you can gain from Carla selection. A fantastic opportunity to not only have Dr. Jamie Ward, but also Sharon McIntyre to take all your questions on Carla. But to kick things off, we have the first presentation in the 2020 Deer Industry Conference virtual conference from your board chair of Deer Industry New Zealand, Ian Walker, who will give us the state of the nation. Ian will discuss the evolving issues affecting deer farming this year, and after his presentation, again, questions live to Ian. All that after a short few messages from our wonderful sponsors.
Dinner doesn't start with the twist of a knob that releases the gas that ignites the hob. Nor does it start in the depths of a book, from the depths of a mind of a passionate cook. It starts way back in the soil and land, at the mercy of the elements in a farmer's hand. And there lies the question that needs to be raised. This dinner of yours, was it loved? Was it praised? If the answer is yes, then you'll probably see it started right here, and oh, what a meal it will be.
Really pleased we got into this. Thanks for your help, Dave.
It's a good idea, honey. You reckon it'll come out? Cover it and tell Compare to leave it 10 minutes. You'll be fine. Good call, Dave.
Good call on getting those security cameras, Dave.
You call a new one yet?
Yeah, kind of.
When you've got decisions to make, we'll be there to help you make the right call.
I'd go for those ones, Bob. Yeah, good call.
Did you choose these?
Oh, you know.
For great advice and insurance, talk to FMG.
Good afternoon and welcome to the 2020 Deer Industry Virtual Conference. This has been an extraordinary year and we were very disappointed to have to cancel our conference in Invercargill this year. We will have the event in 12 months' time in May 2021 and we'll all look forward to that southern hospitality. We've had to adjust to new ways of operating in the past couple of months and many of these changes will become a permanent part of doing business. Video conferencing will become a usual way of checking in with people, but there's still nothing like getting together to really connect. We know how important it is in challenging times to keep connected, and keeping informed is more important than ever. So thank you for joining us today to participate in this interactive session. This will be the first of a series of these presentations, and over the next 3 weeks that the DINS executive have organised for us, and thanks to Sarah Perriam for hosting us. Each session will have updates from the DINS team, and then they have opportunities to ask questions. As I've said, these are challenging times. We're in the midst of the greatest economic and social dislocation since the Second World War. The catastrophe that has befallen countries around the world has stripped wealth from economies, health from societies, and certainty from future plans. The consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic will be felt for years to come, and without an effective vaccine, we still do not know when the disease will be brought under control. In New Zealand, we can be proud of our reaction to the imposition of the greatest shutdown of personal liberty and economic activity we have ever witnessed. The way that farming and food businesses responded responsibly to the restrictions has helped the country emerge quickly from the lockdown. There were certainly frustrations with the bureaucracy of some of the rules, but we have achieved the aim of limiting COVID from the country initially. And this provides us with the freedom and choices and the absence of anxieties that our friends and colleagues in so many countries still do not enjoy. We hope that the measures that their governments are enacting will encourage the disease and speed return to a more normal way of life. The impact this has had on our deer industry is severe. We supply venison to restaurants around the world. All the restaurants in our main markets closed virtually overnight. Food service companies were left with no other decisions but to cancel orders of products from around the world as they had no immediate outlet for them. Orders for lobsters, beef tenderloins and lamb shanks were affected as well as venison. I'm confident we are now through the worst period of that uncertainty. Catering establishments around the world are reopening and commerce is flowing or starting to. Our venison marketing companies have signalled some improving price expectations for later in this year. And while we might not like what they are telling us, it is better to have some guidance to allow for planning and budgeting. You'll be hearing from Nick and the venison marketers later in this session. As an industry, we have the balance of two main revenue streams, and this has helped us in the past. Sometimes when venison is down, velvet is up, and vice versa. We were very lucky that the COVID pandemic affected China and the Republic of Korea at the end of our main velvet export season this year. We have enjoyed a great run of velvet prizes over the last few years, and while it is too early to give any guidance on future price levels, there are some positive signs for the coming year. Reece will bring us up to date with the velvet prospects later in this session as well. But with the good returns comes responsibilities too. We must be responsible with how we maintain the high standards of animal welfare. We must be responsible with how we manage our stags on winter crops. Market returns are uncertain, So we all need to watch the costs of our inputs very carefully to avoid the false economy of maximising production at the cost of profit. At the start of the year, our challenges were mainly domestically focused. Changes to the water regulations, the imposition of costs to account for greenhouse gas emissions, and the perception of an urban-rural divide threatening our sense of place as responsible food producers and guardians of the land. The impact of COVID has not changed the need to address these issues, however, but has changed the nature of the conversation. Food producers are held in higher regard by the New Zealand population now. The government has listened to the rural sectors concerned about the freshwater proposals, and we now have a partnership approach to account for and reduce agricultural greenhouse gas emissions, which can keep us out of the flawed emissions trading scheme. We spoke at the 2019 conference in Wellington about doing the right thing, about managing our land, our animals, and our people the right way to ensure that we can be proud of our business and our industry and present these good practices to the communities of interest. At DINS, we've been investing in helping farmers with their complete and use farm environment plans to improve soil and water management. We remain committed to helping 100% of dairy farmers have farm environment plans, understand them, and execute the plans on their properties. The rules around freshwater management, so contentious last year, have been set, so we now know what we have to do. There will be costs, and there are still some details that need to be worked through, and we'll continue to challenge unnecessary bureaucracy of consenting if consenting is needed for everyday farming activities. But we need to show where we already meet those requirements, which will be on the majority of farms, and get on with it where we need to. The rollout of our dairy industry environment groups over the last 18 months have been some of the most effective practice change groups we have initiated. And I encourage all dairy farmers with dairy to seek to get involved to help share the practical lessons on improving land management. On the issue of greenhouse gases and the changing climate, weather extremes are predicted to become a more regular part of our lives. A one-off drought, an unseasonal storm, or warm winter's days do not in itself signify climate change, but the trend of steadily rising global temperatures and warming oceans is irrefutable. As a result, our nation has committed to reducing our emissions of greenhouse gases, and agriculture has been called on to play its part. We do not agree with all the calculations, and we do not agree with the weighting that short-lived biological methane gets when fossil fuels are clearly the dominant contributor to rising greenhouse gas levels in the atmosphere. And we continue to work with other agricultural organisations and the New Zealand government to arrive at a better assessment of the real impact of changes in methane levels. Dairy Industry New Zealand has joined with all other agriculture sector groups in a partnership with government to introduce mechanisms that will account for and put a price on agricultural greenhouse gas emissions. This partnership is called Hawaka Eka Noa, and it gives agriculture 5 years to introduce a mechanism that will lower farm emissions and to help with adaptation to climate change. But if we can't agree on farm accounting mechanism, agriculture will enter the emissions trading scheme, nothing more than a tax on production, providing no incentive for efficiency and opening the door to afforestation of production, producing agricultural land. I've spoken to the government ministers about the risks to rural communities from blanket forestry. I've been told that this is not the government's intention, but livestock options must be allowed to compete fairly with other land uses. Deer farming, whether for breeding, venison, finishing, or velvet, needs to be allowed to compete for your dollar without being hamstrung by the foreign investment rules and incentives that undermine food production as an option for New Zealand. But deer farming needs to be productive and efficient, and we continue to see increases in carcass weights as the sign that farmers have responded well to the challenge of increasing productivity. The combination of improved genetics, feeding, and health practices means your deer are more productive than ever before, and we see that with increasing carcass weights of nearly 5 kilograms over the last few years. As a deer industry, we certainly celebrate our characteristics of fortitude and resilience in the face of adversity and our innovation to overcome these challenges. The drought and feed shortages that affected much of the country at the moment are testing that resilience to the max. The characteristic of farmers that must change is stoicism. Stress erodes confidence, impedes decision making, and the cumulative stress that many farmers and their families are under has led to unfortunate consequences. I implore you to be brave enough to have conversations with your friends, neighbours and colleagues to normalise discussions about stress and mental health. DINS has run some exceptional activities with some of our younger and new members of the sector on dealing with pressure. Hopefully some of these lessons provided during those sessions have assisted them manage some of the uncertainty that currently affects their businesses and farming lives as we move through this difficult period. To help get through this, we need to look out to the post-COVID world. Things will improve. The people who like our venison and the use of our dairy products are still fans of those products, and they will return once the normal channels of commerce fully reopen. Over the next few online sessions, the DINS team and dairy product marketers will run through their current work programs and how they see the future for our dairy industry. They will all welcome questions that any of the questions you may have. So in finishing, I would just like to thank Innes and his team for the efforts over the last year, and particularly the challenges of the last 3 or 4 months. The challenges that we're all aware of have been felt by the staff as well as the board, and I can assure you that everyone is working hard to create some certainty for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that presentation, Ian Walker, the Chair for Dairy Industry New Zealand. Now, I am seeing all your comments here around some of the technical difficulties some of you are having. It seems to be playing okay on my Google Chrome on the Dairy Industry website, but it seems for some of you on Internet Explorer, potentially Safari, clicking through to YouTube is working for you, as well as it is being streamed on Facebook. But don't panic, I have got up here the chat on YouTube, the chat on Slido, and the chat on Facebook all wide open to take your questions, because that's what this is all about. The focus of this year's conference is on you. Now, I've got 1 or 2 questions here myself, and then I'll kick straight into them as you get typing your own for Ian. This is a feature of Q&A Live, happens after every presentation, so you'll get into the swing of it. Now, Ian Walker joins us now following that presentation. Good afternoon, sir.
Hi, Sarah. How are you?
Good. Very interesting stuff. Now, you said that you thought the environment groups DINS had set up is going well. What's working well with them?
Well, I think, as you've probably been aware, we set a strategy back 2 years ago where we announced that we wanted 100% of dairy farms to have farm environment plans. And that's been, we've increase the scope of some of the advanced parties, and so we've been encouraging them to get involved in those. And so that's what I guess what I'm referring to there.
Yeah, cool. Now, my apologies that Joel, would you mind just turning Ian's audio up slightly? That'd be fabulous. Thank you very much. Now, I know the Hawke's Bay is going through a very tough time. What has DINS been doing to help with the drought?
Yeah, no, there's certainly been some challenges, Sarah, in Hawke's Bay, and I think DINS have done a little bit, and the Deer Farmers Association, particularly the local branch, have done a lot of work, and including some branches from outside of Hawke's Bay in terms of getting feed in there. But from a DINS perspective, we've continued to talk with particularly the avenues where deer have been slaughtered or can be slaughtered, to try and make sure that there's a flow of stock occurring. Maybe a question.
So sorry, Ian.
Yeah, one of the strategies obviously is getting through the drought is destocking, which can is a way of decreasing your feed demand. Yeah.
Staying in the Hawke's Bay, DINS has been a funder of Osprey. What have you been doing to work alongside Osprey with managing TB in the region?
Yeah, that's an interesting question at the moment, because DINS is a shareholder of Osprey, and I actually am involved with that group dealing with the TB. Now, up until now, there's been no deer herds that have been involved that have had infections diagnosed, but I think there may be one that's hanging in the air at the moment. And there's a whole lot of background to that particular area, because it's been a challenge to keep the infected possums and deer in that area, with the wild ones, to keep them under control. to try and, so that that infection doesn't spread to those farms. So we're pretty actively involved as feedback to Osprey as well in terms of what's happening.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for kicking us off in this 3-part series across the next 3 Tuesdays. It's Ian Walker, your chair for Deer Industry New Zealand. Now, up next in the Deer Industry New Zealand Conference 2020, where the focus is on you, we will be joined on this live stream by CEO for Deer Industry New Zealand, Innes Moffat, who will provide an update on DINZ's activities that have supported the industry through these volatile times. All that after our message from our wonderful sponsors.
Some of you know I've enjoyed a few Deer conferences over the years, but this is my first in my new role, and it gives me an opportunity to reflect on why I have chosen to continue my career with the deer industry. Up until I was about 15, I was always going to carry on in my father's footsteps and take over the family farm that he took over from his father, who took it over from his father, who took it on from his father. But the mid-1980s was a grim time for sheep farming in New Zealand. Droughts, floods, terrible prices, and the withdrawal of government support meant that agriculture was referred to as a sunset industry, an industry in decline. All of that made the idea of getting a non-agriculture job, like international stockbroking or something, look pretty attractive. And so I didn't take on the farm. But neither of those things happened. Farming got through the 1980s. Agriculture is not a sunset industry, and its importance is being reinforced to New Zealand as never before at the moment. And I never did become an international financial wizard. And the deer industry has played its part in both these outcomes. The development of the New Zealand deer industry provided the innovation and flexibility of New Zealand deer farmers. It provides diversification and additional revenue opportunities. It shows leadership in the ongoing transformation of the New Zealand agricultural industry. And it is that transformation and innovation that brought me back to agriculture, and after a spell in Europe, back to New Zealand to work for DINZ. Farming got through the disruption of the 1980s and has gone on to thrive. We will get through the COVID disruption. Farmers, processors, and marketers, and even some chefs, prove their passion for deer farming and deer products every day. And we hope that you know that the staff at DINZ share that too. We also share in the unease which is affecting our industry at the moment. Ian has talked about the global environment we find ourselves in and the changing domestic situation agriculture is adapting to. I'm going to review in a little more depth some of the activities Deer Industry New Zealand is doing on your behalf to help create a more certain future. During our presentations over the next 3 weeks, you'll hear from science, policy, producer services, and marketing staff who will talk about the programs they have in place to help attain DINZ's strategic objectives. These are the premium positioning of deer products, market diversification, sustainable on-farm value creation, and being a cohesive and respected industry. But first, here's a picture of a scary man, Kerry Evans. Kerry is a clinical psychologist, an ex-professional footballer, an advisor to the All Blacks, and works with teams, schools and businesses on performance management. We invited Kerry to work with a group of young farmers and advisors late last year on the topic of performing under pressure. Kerry talked about managing stress and performance and reminded us that we need to concentrate on factors that we can control and on people we can influence, and to not focus on factors or people beyond our control. For the premium positioning of our dairy products, we can only focus on what we can control and on who we can influence. We understand our dairy velvet markets are weathering the storm okay, but what can we control? We control the story and the integrity of our production systems. We have talked about ways to protect the value of our New Zealand velvet brand and to protect the investment velvet producers have made in our velvet system. A big step forward for this protection will be the Veltrack system we are introducing. With the support of velvet buyers and the NVSB, DINS is making a significant investment on your behalf to future-proof velvet supply chain integrity. Veltrack is being introduced to provide paddock to processor traceability and quality assurance for every single stick of velvet you produce, and will provide overseas buyers with the means of guaranteeing the provenance of that velvet. And with more and more marketing companies proudly displaying the New Zealand origin of their velvet ingredient, this is becoming increasingly important. Velvet producers have been working with supply chain compliance for the past few years. The good news is that Veltrack will make this easier and quicker. Those of you who are enjoying working with EASDs know how much easier filling in forms online is rather than fiddling with and losing bits of paper. The new tags have been well received, and next year, when they come with UHF chips, the system will work seamlessly for your benefit. On market diversification, Kerry Evans talked about performing under pressure, and we are all dealing with the pressure of the impact of COVID on our venison markets now. We came into COVID on the back of some spectacular years for venison, but with an overhang of frozen venison in the USA and Europe. Diversification into China was extremely important and going well. But in March, all of the restaurants in Europe and North America closed, and access to China was stopped. I know there was a lot of uncertainty and anxiety about venison prospects and the schedule as we went into COVID. Everybody in the supply chain had had the rug pulled out from under them. Suppliers to the restaurant trade did not know if they had a business tomorrow, and as a result, they were not thinking about venison sales in 6 months' time. For DINS, 3 clear priorities emerged. Restore confidence and access to China, assist marketers develop new channels to consumers, and ramp up promotion of venison for food service as restaurants reopened. With China, we have had success in confirming access for venison, and this is allowing trade to resume. But access for co-products and bones is unresolved, and this will continue to have an impact on the schedule. All marketers are looking at new channels: retail, online, home delivery, even door-to-door. It takes time to develop new products and distribution channels, and it is harder for perishable products. But we are very pleased to see a good win with an alliance customer getting Savannah into a Belgian retailer over the summer, First Light introducing new retail goods, and our other companies ramping up their retail and home delivery offers and promotions. And thirdly, Nick Taylor and our contract chefs are producing new support material for chefs in China, Belgium, the USA, Germany, and the Netherlands, passing this on to the importers and assisting with key account contacts to get ready to push venison as restaurants reopen. And they are reopening, and they are buying venison again. It's great to see restaurants in Germany and Belgium open, and I hear booked up for a month. And the chefs who were fans of New Zealand venison before lockdown are still with us. But a word on the venison schedule. Companies have, to the best of their ability, sought to provide producers with some certainty about future prospects at a very uncertain time. I know there wasn't enough information coming out during weaner sales in April, and I understand that the method some venison companies chose to provide some certainty did not please everybody. But the clear signal that was set at that time provided some certainty back into the livestock market in New Zealand, which allowed trade to resume, and has set a floor for pricing in the market that allowed discussions to resume, with a lift in the schedule since then. If I was any good at PR, then my headline this week would be unprecedented lift in the venison prices, 20% increase in 1 week. Yeah, nah. Too soon? Probably. Revenue is one contributor towards sustainable on-farm value creation. The other is efficient production systems, which means getting more from less. It's great to see your velvet and venison productivity increasing. Higher carcass weights are testament to the better genetics, feeding, and management that you have implemented over the past few years. Velvet weights improve year on year, but need to be balanced with keeping an eye on costs of production and keeping a balance to the farm business portfolio. Sustainable on-farm value creation arises from enabling deer farmers to continuously improve their operations to deliver greater value more efficiently. One of the areas DINS manages is the genetics referencing system Deer Select. The genetics program DINS runs through Deer Select was recently independently reviewed and concluded that the deer industry was benefiting from an average annual 8% improvement in the rate of genetic gain among recorded herds since 2009, and that this rate had accelerated in the past 5 years with improved recording by breeders. A comparable sized sector was used for comparison, the Irish sheep sector. Without objective genetic breeding values, their rate of genetic gain was negative. The RAM decisions they were making based on the good old iometer were sending them backwards. We have some exciting new technology that is becoming affordable for a small industry like deer that will power up genetic improvement. And proof that Carla is a heritable indicator of parasite tolerance is super exciting for breeders. Jamie Ward will be talking about this later on today. My predecessors, Mark O'Connor and Dan Coop, talked about the importance of being proud to be a deer farmer. Our confidence has taken a knock with COVID, but the history and the tenacity of deer farmers, the great reputation of our products, and the advancements we have coming through science tell me that we can continue to have confidence in our industry. We continue to improve the premium positioning of our products. We diversify into the best returning markets. And as we build sustainable on-farm value, we will improve our reputation as a cohesive and respected industry. Thank you.
Well, it looks like we've sorted out some of the technical difficulties and that you're all able to watch and work out where to enter in your questions. So no excuses, either on the YouTube chat or, of course, the Slido Q&A. I've got them right here in front of me. And I'm sure Innes would appreciate some questions beyond my own. I get to interview him enough. But to kick off, I will ask a few while you will type your questions in for Innes. Innes Moffat, CEO for Deer Industry New Zealand, joins us now following that presentation. Now, Innes, with the uncertainty in venison markets, is DINS cutting costs?
DINS certainly keeps a very close eye on all of our expenses, but we think that where there are going to be opportunities to be helping companies, particularly venison companies with tactical sales of venison, we should be making the most use of our resources. And so that may mean that we may increase some expenditure in some of our key markets. But as I say, we're very mindful of the levy income that we have, so we'll be keeping a very close eye on it.
Is there more venison being sold in New Zealand as a result of some of those supply chain interruptions because of COVID?
There certainly is. All of the companies are putting a bit of a push into the New Zealand market. And I think a company like Silver Fern Farms reported that as we went into lockdown, they had their best month of retail sales ever. So maybe it was a case in some instances where people were stockpiling toilet paper and venison as essentials to have as we went into the lockdown period.
Certainly essential for health. We know that much, not so much toilet paper. Now, what's DINS doing about the freshwater regulations and working with government on this policy?
Yeah, we've got our environmental stewardship manager, Dr. Lindsay Fong, who is working very closely with Deer Farmers Associations branches around the country, and has been invited alongside the other sector pastoral groups and agricultural sector groups to review the draft regulations which are coming out. We alongside the DFA made a submission last year on some of the areas of those freshwater regulations that we felt were unnecessary. There's a little bit more detail to come, and Lindsay will be providing us with an update in one of the sessions next week. But there will be more information to come out around that.
Is DINS working with other agencies to help promote New Zealand products overseas? Yeah, we really want to get alongside other producers and exporters of fine New Zealand produce. An example of that is something that we call Pure New Zealand Cuisine, that we've been working alongside Beef and Lamb New Zealand and some of the wineries, Aquaculture New Zealand, in the USA for a few years now. And we put a chef into culinary schools, and they present in a non-commercial manner, not in a sales manner, a full basket of the very best of New Zealand produce. So that's an example of a successful activity across the groups, and we'd like to see if we can expand those into some other markets. Now, Innes, we've got some questions rolling in here. Bill Robinson from Cambridge would like to comment that the velvet tags are clumsy and good education program needs to happen to get farmers to use them properly.
Bill is absolutely correct that a good education program is essential, and as we begin to introduce the Veltrack system, we will be putting a huge amount of effort into making sure that people can use the system for their benefit.
And Rod and Rach Inch from Broccoli Deer Farm said since the decision of some of the processors has affected farmer confidence in them, wondering how DINS is looking at supporting some of the smaller processors to take more venison.
Oh, look, we work alongside all of our venison processors, and they are all doing as much as they can to find and develop new markets so that they can be returning as much as possible back to the venison producers.
And lastly, has carcass weights gone up, or are people killing their deer later?
Yeah, we definitely think that deer are growing faster. We're looking at a lot of the data that is being produced. It's one of the advantages of having our Deer Pro operation is that we've got a very detailed data set on carcass weights, and it clearly show that growth rates have improved by about 3 or 4% per year over the last 4 or 5 years. And that's a great testament to the care and attention that deer farmers are taking with their stock, improvements in genetics, certainly improvements in feeding and nutrition, and as we say, a bit more attention around animal health as well. So it's been a good example of some successful work by New Zealand deer farmers.
Well, it's been a big year for you, Innes, and congratulations in your new role as CEO for Deer Industry New Zealand. Keep up the great work. Now, in this Deer Industry New Zealand 3-part conference for 2020, where the focus is on you, this is a 3-part series over 3 Tuesdays, that starting from today from 1 o'clock across Facebook, YouTube, and on the deernz.org website, where you can see the schedule of who is coming up in the next week and the week after. Now, after the short break from our sponsors, we're going to talk to producer manager for Deer Industry New Zealand, Tony Pearce, who's going to share his thoughts on the priorities for deer farmers this year.
Rabobank, New Zealand's only specialist food and agribank. A bank working together with farmers for farmers. Our commitment to our rural clients and their communities runs deep. More than a century ago, farmers in the Netherlands made sure they were treated fairly when it came to getting the finance they needed to grow food. They knew they were stronger and had more clout if they got together. That idea has endured with Rabobank across the decades and across the world. It's how we get things done. Combining our extensive global knowledge and strong local networks with our highly regarded Rabo research, we're in this for the long haul. Food and agri is in our DNA. Today, New Zealanders save with Rabobank and their savings stay in New Zealand to support Kiwi farmers and food producers. These savings are supporting strong, successful, sustainable rural businesses, and they're helping New Zealand. Savers and borrowers, town and country all coming together. Together is how we can make a difference. We're more productive together. Together we can grow an abundance of healthy food while protecting our world. Together we'll come up with new and better ways to grow food using the latest technology that's environmentally friendly. And together we'll work with our clients to produce great food sustainably and reduce food waste. Together is how we face the future and overcome its challenges.
Good afternoon. I'd like to cover the very valuable DINS DFA relationship with highlights from the year, covering the annual Dairy Industry Conference, its link with P2P, the Next Generation Conference in South Canterbury, branch chairman's meetings, politics, submissions, and communications. In May 2019, at the Reflections and Directions Annual Dairy Industry Conference, Dan Cooper and Ian Walker reflected on an industry scorecard. In the areas relating to within New Zealand aspects of the DINS strategy, they reported that growing on-farm value, in their view, scored an A+. I agree, and it continues and is increasing. A cohesive industry scored a B-. The advanced parties are well supported, the next generation oversubscribed, but many farmers are not involved and some DFA branches are struggling. There's no real change there, and it is a major challenge for the DFA. Respected industry, they scored a C. I think we're at least a B-. Other farmers view deer farming positively, but there is still work to be done with the public officials and politicians. Sustainable practice on farm, in some respects, is disappointing that we haven't met our farm environment plan target, but I think it rates at least a B-, as DFA branches and the dairy industry environment groups are having significant impact, as will new regulations. In reviewing the activity over the past year involving the interaction between the DINS team and the DFA at all levels, sees we've accepted these challenges and continued to meld and advance the cohesive and respected aspects of the DINS strategy, especially focusing on producer engagement. The producer management activities have grown over the past 18 years and now live in a substantial alliance cemented with DINS with the advent of the P2P program. On the ground, the advanced party initiatives throughout the country, the current innovation leadership programs, and individual commitment continued growth. Emerging new leadership and innovators of modern deer farming are inspiring an industry by example, with many of these farms now into the next generation succession. That Wellington 2019 conference, Reflection and Directions, continued as a DINS DFA integrated event. The conference created value for the attendees and wider industry by balancing a bevy of highly talented keynote speakers with an outstanding facilitator in MC and with Jamie Fitzgerald, who also committed time pre-conference with the DFA's SAP, Executive Committee and the branch chairs. Instead of talking exclusively at delegates, the 180 attendees were also encouraged to actively participate in a workshop format to establish an environmental scorecard for the industry and clarify exactly what our strengths and weaknesses are and what practice changes must occur over the next few years. Throughout the year, the industry has extended its reach and strategy around the growing negative political and societal reaction to farming per se. While this public reaction is not necessarily based on informed view, there is a dominantly strong political emphasis on farming and environmental risks that livestock can pose, and has occupied significant time this year in a combined approach. A highlight of the conference was the reporting from the P2P program, both the venison company updates in market and on farm as part of the Advanced Party and Regional Workshop extension activity. The only negative was the lack of interest and response from any government ministers to attend, which was a key reason for returning to Wellington. That remains a concern. The industry also remains committed to the relationship with Perium Media to provide permanent accessible records of this annual event. I'd like to cover the features of the year in the Next Generation Annual Branch Chairmans and New Faces meeting. DINS, alongside DFA, physically and financially actively supports these two key events. The Next Generation program is now in its 7th year and attracted a record 70 delegates visiting two outstanding properties in Halden Station and Melior Genetics in South Canterbury. Beyond an excellent farm tour and explanation of how both these properties work, twin themes of understanding and utilising the genetic gain that's available today via Deer Select, and continuation with the ongoing aspects of succession in building a reputation and the value of your integrity in career planning were the twin themes. The event also links with the P2P initiative in hosting the final days of the Future Farmers Tour, an introduction to deer farming, which allowed the revelation that about half the delegates at this next generation were under 25 years of age. This 2020 event will be based in Central Hawke's Bay on the 6th and 7th of August and features farming in a drought crisis with farm visits to Smedley Station and then to Temco Ag, hosted by George Williams and Laura Billings, and later will connect with the Rural Support Trust and the banking sector. October's annual DFA Branch Chairs and New Faces Conference has expanded to be an active 2-day event in which available DINS board members and executives contribute. This meeting allows access to key government officials and keynote speakers. This year we extended the links with Federated Farmers, Beef and Lamb New Zealand, PAMU, Ag First, plus the Ministry for the Environment and MPI. In addition, the conference workshop deer wintering systems, as well as enjoying the company of 6 new faces from the branches. That introduction has been running since 2006 and is co-funded with DINS and designed to encourage leadership roles at branch and national level. The event also concluded with a DFA thanks and farewell function for retiring DINS CEO Dan Coop. Dan's relationship with the DFA was characterised by his constructive support and continued accessibility for DFA leadership to DINS staff and their portfolio updates. This occurs today as a significant part of all executive committee meetings. That continues with monthly teleconference with the DINS chairman and CEO as well. In terms of politics and submissions and the DFA perspectives, we enjoy a strong working relationship with all DINS executives, no better expressed in the openness and cooperation in developing submissions in areas of common interest. The DFA is particularly fortunate to have had both Lindsay Fong and Catherine Sayer as allies in developing submissions, both jointly and separately in areas like NATE and the fast-moving myriad of regional and national environmental policy. DINS presents its own but well-informed view by virtue of that cooperation. The recent complementary DINS and DFA submissions on the essential freshwater policy, Actions for Healthy Waterways, are an excellent case in point, and certainly the deer industry's views and realities have been reflected somewhat in the final outcomes. None of this is valuable without good communication. And while it's true that regionally many of the DFA branches have struggled for growth and succession and to add to their own events beyond velvet competitions and the odd workshop, but the relevance of the DFA remains strong, with 1,190 subscribing members from around 1,400 active deer farms. To me, that suggests that the inclusion of the DINS board and executive staff alongside the many and varied aspects of the passion to profit activity reflects the evolution of a DFA into a whole of industry engagement from pasture to plate. A key factor has been the communication development and quality of information that now arrives in both printed and electronic form. This is exemplified by the bi-monthly Deer Industry News. There will be few people that attend any of the industry events, from branch field days prior to P2P, the Focus Farm, Environment Awards, and the Showcase Field Days, and Advanced Party and Regional Workshops, that haven't drifted by Deer Industry News editor Phil Stewart's camera lens, or have been listened to, quoted, and had those events expanded into the outstanding information resources we have as our flagship journal. It's also been gratifying indeed to see the DFA's Stagline Online monthly electronic newsletter progress from a two-sided wall of typing that the Executive Committee started 14 years ago, now with issue 152 circulated by the net to 1,200 active DFA members and associates. It's also been a welcome addition to have the monthly inputs from DIN's executives commenting on recent activity in their portfolios and using Stagline to seek comment and reactions to DIN's programs and initiatives. The credit for and development of that lies entirely with the great communication and administration managers that our team within DINS has benefited from over the years. Natalie, Hannah, Amy, Kenwyn, and Rebecca. All are multi-talented, efficient and creative in the communications and events development arena, and have all provided an ongoing stepwise change to the face of DFA communications through DINS, far beyond the expectations of this role developed 18 years ago. Good communication and engagement with producers remains the driving force of the DFA in today's world. Like this virtual conference adaptation of our traditional event, today's world is all about being able to adjust, adapt, and seek continual improvement in the servicing of producer needs for great representation, great communication, and great service. The combination of DFA's national and branch structure embedded in and serviced by a committed team and structure within DINS, I believe meets the vision for the DFA established in the early 2000s and will continue to serve deer farmers well into the future. It's immensely satisfying to have a small part in that relationship and its cooperative power. Thanks very much.
Great to hear there from Producer Manager for Deer Industry New Zealand, Tony Pearce's presentation on how the New Zealand Deer Farmers Association's activities are representing members' interests on all those things: deer productivity, environmental stewardship, and of course the business of getting down and farming deer. And Tony joins us from a cold, wet Dunedin. Good afternoon, sir.
Hi, Sarah.
How wonderful presentation showing that the DFA has been very busy in the last 12 months. Now, as we've, for anyone who's just joined us, we are taking questions for the presenters on the 2020 Deer Industry New Zealand online virtual conference series. So please, wherever you're watching on YouTube, or of course on the Facebook comments or on Slido on the deernz.org website. I have a few questions of my own here for Tony, but of course it's not about me, it is about you. Tony, what does the conferencing plan look like for 2021? I was very excited about heading to the wonderful Bill Richardson Museum in Invercargill.
Well, that will all be happening in 2021, same week, so it's the 18th, 19th, and on the 20th, the Advanced Party National Conference will also become, in effect, the field day. So it's exactly the same, and the Transport World were very gracious, no penalties for cancellation, and things will just proceed as they were planned for this year. And our feature keynote speakers have also all committed to being available for that week. So have our sponsors, so it's really encouraging.
And what a great time to launch the 50 years of deer farming that Linda Gray has so kindly been working on. And the DFA have sponsored this?
We're part sponsors, so we're clearly the DFA's formation in 1975 was a little bit later than the first deer farming licence, but an integral part of the whole history of deer farming. And we've done a lot of work with Linda, and the DFA felt that it was worthy of giving some financial kickstart. So we've contributed at $10,000 from what has been a pretty good surplus within the DFA, and we're not there to build up funds, we're there to use them.
I certainly remember the 50 years of Angus in New Zealand, or 150 years, my apologies, and the book that went with that, and it was absolutely fabulous. Bill Robinson would like to know, will Rising Stars happen again in April or earlier?
The plan is, again, to have it in April, and part of that is to get around or to make the transport of these massive hard antler heads easier, fully stripped and dried. And so we have rebooked the same venue and the same event for Cromwell at this point, but it's certainly not cemented in stone.
Are there any other... Sorry, Tony.
We'll discuss that further at the branch chairs meeting in October.
Wonderful. Are there any other initiatives between the DFA and DINS that would be useful to share with our audience?
Well, I think virtually everything that both organisations do have DFA in the background, and farmers right in the foreground as well. I don't think the two organisations have ever worked as closely and as strongly together across so many diverse fields. So I think the advanced party program and the passion to profit have just lifted that whole of industry vision to a new level, and it's very encouraging. And you can see that when you go out to field days or activities, just what a buzz there is around the industry at the moment. And it's also so gratifying to see so many young people, be they staff or new farmers in succession, coming in and supporting those programs.
Tony, in all of the work they're bringing farmers and the consumer closer together between the two organisations, and for the time that I've been working with the deer industry now, it has been so encouraging to get to the point, Tony, that you've just done an online presentation, and then you have someone from the restaurant trade in the US currently watching here, Angus Cleland, checking in from Napa Valley, in California, watching. That must be so humbling.
Oh, well, it is somewhat nervously humbling, but that's great. And certainly these past weeks have shown just how we can do things differently and as effectively, but never lose sight of that one-on-one contact or group contact within the industry has driven the passion and the fun and the enjoyment in this industry for so long. I hope that continues.
And some special words here from Angus, Tony. He said the US restaurant trade is down but not out. It will come back. Keep the faith. You produce a first-class product. So it's pretty special. Now, we're up next to close the Deer Industry New Zealand's conference for 2020, where the focus is all about you. We will be joined by Dr. Jamie Ward, farm system scientist from Ag Research, on the latest research in the Carla science work, and taking your questions, not only Jamie, but also the wonderful Sharon McIntyre. All this after a short message from our sponsors.
A couple of years ago, we purchased a tough 3,000 acre hill block adjacent to our 4,000 acres of flats. This block has added the perfect balance to our venison program and Pearl Forest Estate. At Pearl Forest Estate, all our deer have electronic ear tags. We use Gallagher equipment to record every facet of the work that happens here, whether it's animal health, weights, grouping, pedigree analysis, comments and drafting. We have a very accurate data collection system which we then analyse on either the Gallagher APS software or CervidIQ. You know, back in the day when we didn't have the access to Gallagher software and hardware, it was all manual data entry and yelling tag numbers out in the deer shed with dirty ear tags, everything. It was a nightmare and took forever. We've got 8,000 deer here. They're all EID'd now. They're all DNA'd, so we have full pedigrees on every animal here on the farm. And we do a lot of recording of certain traits and weights, and so you know the amount of data that we're gathering here is huge. And without Gallagher, it used to be a huge job. Now it's made it very easy. You know, I make draft lists on the HR5, and I can now process 600 hinds an hour through the octagon, drafting 8 different ways, which is invaluable at mating time. I'm sending the hinds out the door as fast as the boys can keep them up to me. In the past, it was a massive job. We continue to grow with the software. We're using it more and more and creating more traits and more life data fields, and just the level of information that we have on our animals now is massive. You know, we're running 4 deer sheds. We've got 2 TSIs, 2 HR5s, so we can be gathering data all over the show here now. You know, the other thing I really like about Gallagher is their backup support. We've always there might be some teething problems, or I don't know how to do something, so they're just a phone call away. They jump on TeamViewer, and so they're on my computer basically, showing me how to do it, and they always have a solution to my problems. It's very simple to load from APS Office. All the analysing we do there we do a lot of analysing within APS, but we also download sessions and analyse further on Excel and our stud program too, and that's all very seamless and easy. So all in all, we couldn't live without it now.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am Jamie Ward from the AgriSearch Invermay Farm Systems team. And today I'm pleased to bring to you the latest information on our Carla research and how you can benefit from it and make the best use of Carla. So this is what we are talking about today, a little saliva sample on a cotton roll. The measurement of the antibody to infective larvae from this saliva sample can be a powerful tool for the deer industry. I'm both excited and relieved to be talking to you about this today. Why am I relieved? Because this parasitology stuff is hard. You are dealing with an ecosystem within an ecosystem. You, as the farmer, are trying to exert control over the deer that you farm, while they are trying to exert control over the parasite that's trying to get in and set up house inside them. And why am I excited? Because this offers a new tool to do things differently in the parasite control space, and it offers welfare benefits to our animals. So let's just get straight down to it. Carla offers our first tool to select deer for favourable immune responses. Not only that, but immune responses to our most problematic and widespread disease challenges, those being gastrointestinal parasites and lungworm. Now for deer, it's important to note that this lungworm stuff is new. It's not something that has been measured in sheep. We have the Carla breeding value that breeders and farmers can use to make selection or purchase decisions for improved resistance to nematode parasites. There have been several production benefits demonstrated, particularly around increased live weight gain in groups of parasitized animals. Shifting to herds of deer with higher genetic merit for Carla will increase the resilience of deer farm systems by producing animals that are more resistant to parasite challenges, whether those challenges are due to unexpected climatic events, management changes or oversights, or other stressful events. And when incorporated with other good management practice for parasite control, will offer the opportunity over time to reduce anthelmintic inputs. Okay, so let's have a look at some data. Now, because Carla concentration increases exponentially in the saliva, this was all done on logarithmic scales, and hopefully after COVID-19, you're all a bit more familiar with those. Anyway, this is why I am going to be talking in fold increases. The way we have presented our data is in a 3-fold or a 3 times difference on every gradation on this graph. So for example, one gradation on this graph is from 2 to 6 Carla units. And this is important as big gains can be made early with lower Carla concentrations. So moving from a Carla concentration of 1 to 3 at the low end provides the same reduction or benefit as moving from a Carla concentration of 150 to 400 Carla units at the top end of this scale. Now, this graph is the example for lungworm larvae. And here, for every grid increase, larvae counts reduced by about 14% from our April sampling. And that's this solid straight blue line here. And for June, which is this orange curved line, it is a massive 50% reduction for every gradation. I have a similar graph showing gastrointestinal parasite eggs reducing by approximately 18% in April and 30% in June for each of these threefold increases in Carla units. Now, these reductions in parasite eggs and larvae should result in reductions in new infective larvae contaminating grazed pastures, and hence reduce the amount of animal infection when those pastures actually are grazed. With these big reductions in parasites in June came increased live weight gains over the 32 weeks of the experiment, from weaning in March until slaughter in late October. So let's have a look at what that looks like. The weight gain benefit over the 32 weeks for males, which are the solid blue line, and females, which is this solid orange line, was different. The males gained an extra 2.9 kilograms for every threefold Carla increase. So 2.9 more kilograms from a Carla of 0 to 2, 5.8 more kilograms from a Carla of 0 to 6, and 7.5 kilograms to this black dash line, which represents the average June Carla concentration of the animals in the trial, which was 12 Carla units. This relationship between June Carla concentration and pre-slaughter live weight gains makes it possible to estimate some economic value for the benefit of Carla. To do this, we modelled a few scenarios based on Carla concentration. We did this for males targeting spring slaughter based only on carcass value and cost of extra spring feed. So the least optimistic of these returned just under $6 extra carcass value. They were killed 13 days earlier on average for a difference in marginal value of $10 per head, incorporating the cost of extra feed. This could return over $1 million in extra revenue to the industry, or over $2 million when you account for the marginal value across all rising yearling males slaughtered in a 12-month period. The most optimistic scenario added $23 worth of carcass value, killed 55 days earlier, for a marginal difference of $42. And in total, across all males killed in a year, that's almost $5 million of extra carcass value and nearly $9 million accounting for the marginal value. So how does this stuff all work? I like to use the analogy of M&Ms. So just like M&Ms, infective parasite larvae have a carbohydrate-based outer coating, which protects their fragile, melty insides from the harsh outside world. For M&Ms, this coating is called crunchy deliciousness. For infective larvae, it's called the carbohydrate larval antigen, which is abbreviated to Carla. Sheep, cattle, and deer have all been shown to produce an antibody in saliva against this protective coating, and concentrations of this anti-Carla antibody can be measured in saliva using the Carla test. The Carla test was developed for sheep by Beef and Lamb New Zealand and AgResearch, so a big thanks to them for doing that. Now, the saliva antibody response provides protection against infective larvae by binding to those infective larvae's outer coating and preventing those larvae from establishing in the host animal. So to conclude, the Carla trait in rising yearling deer provides an opportunity to genetically increase the resistance to parasites of our young deer. It can increase live weight gain and reduce pasture contamination of nematode parasites. In short, if you want to increase the genetic merit for Carla in your rising yearlings in autumn, you can decrease parasite burden and increase production. Of course, genetic improvement is permanent, so you can lock in these changes and you can continue to increase the parasite resistance of your herd. Importantly, Carla is not a silver bullet to stop drenching tomorrow, but you can positively change your herd to reduce drenching requirements over time. And I would encourage breeders and farmers to consider including Carla in their breeding objectives or breeding plans, as it offers a way to genetically increase the parasite resistance of your animals. By doing so, you can increase the resilience of your farm systems and improve animal welfare outcomes by decreasing the risks of parasite infection and the harm that they cause in young deer. And I would like to acknowledge all of this Carla research has spanned 10 years, and many, many people, teams, organisations and farmers have been involved. There are way too many to name here, but I would just like to acknowledge the big effort that has gone in this space. Now, I appreciate that most of this information was all pretty high level, so Sharon and I now have 10 minutes to take your questions and get down to a few more specifics. Thank you very much.
Now, on behalf of everybody who has completed a PhD, our next guest would like to apologise for us putting the word doctor in front of him. We are going to welcome now Jamie Ward, Farm System Scientist from Ag Research, alongside his colleague Sharon McIntyre, the Deer Select Manager, who are here to take your questions on everything to do with Carla. Now, I would just be interested to know, Jamie, is it mean that, with regards to drenching regularly throughout doing this saliva test, is there any effect? You there, Jamie? Yeah.
While Jamie's frozen, maybe I can respond
go.
for him. The really wonderful thing about Carla and deer is it's in eating the larvae that produces the immune response. So you can carry on with your normal drenching program and their Carla levels will respond. And you can do the saliva tests and get values.
What about the focus on the graph there, Sharon, from March to June period being of significance?
Well, that's a really important period of growth through to the 1st of June, when animals go on for killing, and that's when they're being hit with lungworm and also gastrointestinals. And the study by Jamie showed that the higher Carla animals had better growth rates through that critical pre-winter period.
Now, we are taking questions for both Sharon and Jamie as we just get him connected. He's coming through very shortly. Wherever you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, make sure that you add that in the comments below, in the YouTube chat or in the Facebook comments below, or if you're listening and watching on the website in Slido. And I'd love to put some questions to our guests here. Now, Jamie, we got you back there.
Oh, great. Have you got me?
Yes, I think we do. Beaming in. Now, Jamie.
Okay, sorry, it dropped out at the wrong minute.
No, that's all good. That's all good. Let's talk about the economic impact on the industry of selecting for this. Sorry, are you there, Jamie?
I appear to have frozen again. Sorry.
Oh, I can see you and hear you. There's some significant impact on the deer industry that you made mention of in your presentation.
So that economic impact is based on estimates from the 2019 males slaughtered. There was about 207,000 males slaughtered over that period. And that's the weightings taken on 3 different scenarios around different levels of Carla and between different levels of Carla in different theoretical individual groups of deer. So essentially one group of deer was the lowest 10% of animals responding, and the other group was the highest 10% of animals responding. So that was what we called the most optimistic of our scenarios. For example, there was a middle scenario that had animals that had no response, and the upper level of that was an average responding animal.
I've got a question coming here. How many breeders are currently assessing Carla in their sires and progeny? Do you know?
I'll
Maybe
pass that one to Sharon. Yeah, she'll know exactly.
Yeah, so we have 5 red breeders that have been doing Carla, some of them for 4 or 5 years now, and we have 5 elk wapiti breeders that have been doing it for 4 or 5 years. And we are starting to see a lift in the average Carla, and there's quite a range of Carlas that will be available and young sires available this season across the range of weight 12 BV, so there's something to suit everyone.
What's the rate of heritability and genetic gain, for how fast this can flow through the deer herd?
Jamie can do heritability. Yeah.
So the heritability for one of these key traits, which is the time that it's predominantly been measured in the past at about 10 months of age, is around about 0.45. So our original estimates in the DPT were lower, about 0.35, but around that 0.45 is about the same as most of our growth traits. So if you want to think about the gains that people have been able to make in some of the growth traits, they potentially can make similar gains in this Carla trait if they choose to select for it that hard. And all these things are about balancing your selection anyway.
And I do have a question coming in on balancing selection here from Rod and Rach Inch from Broccoli Deer Farm. Have you looked at comparisons between deer that carry good Carla genetics and those who carry good heritability traits for velvet?
No, velvet would be about the only one that we haven't really looked at hard. Sharon might have had a little look at that, but in terms of what we've looked at to date, it's mostly been around rising yearling traits, and so we haven't looked at those, but I'll see if Sharon's got anything on that.
Some of the herds that have been recording and selecting on Carla do have a velvet aspect to their herd. Some of them do both venison and velvet, and looking at the weight 12 values, where we range from velvet as generally at the lower end through to more venison specialist high, we do see high Carla levels in some of those low growth animals too. So it's quite likely that some of them are velveters, and it's likely we'll see just as much variation in velvet herds as in the venison focused herds. Likely.
I think beyond that, Sarah, that
And the internet a bit patchy down there at Infome. Jamie's frozen a little bit again. Sharon,
but parasite are just as important in velvet herds as venison. Young animals growing through and to good reproduction rates, good healthy animals are more productive animals.
What to from here, Sharon?
Well, I think we've had breeders who have really taken this on board, even when it was a research BV and the science hadn't really confirmed it. They were starting to record it, which is, it's quite a tricky job to do. And we are starting to see a rise in the sires, so it means they are building it into their selection programs. So I think from here on, with the screening of the young animals, it's not been a lot of time for selection to actually occur, but there is quite a lot of variation in these herds, and there's a lot of potential to select high performance or whatever performance level you want for your traits with above average Carla levels.
And Jamie was there, and he's just disappeared. I was just going to ask him if he was about to do a PhD. But Sharon is what I was going to ask Jamie was about the reward of seeing something of your research go forth from here. Jamie's coming back. And just give him a few
I think
more
it's been
minutes.
10 years in the making. It started with Colin McIntosh, and then, there were 2 studies where at Invermay they sourced sires from industry and they generated progeny, and they have to be born and then grow up and then get measured. So it's quite a long process, and the breeders have taken it on board. I think everyone's really happy. This is a really positive trait. No downsides, all upsides. It would be nice to know if it had other effects on other traits as well, other health traits. But just to have the science prove it and be confident moving forward is a really good step for the industry.
Jamie is dropping in and out. Sharon, there has been a question come in. What extent does Carla have on the effect of reducing disease incidents other than parasites? She frozen as well. Jamie, did you hear that?
Because it is about that coating on the parasites, but it is possible it might be an indicator of a really high functioning immune system. So Jamie may comment. I know they've done some work with vaccinations and seeing, what the response to vaccination levels are in various deer, but it would be nice to know if it was positive for other health challenges.
Jamie's back with us.
So sorry I missed that, but from the end of that we haven't looked at correlating Carla with any other health traits at present.
Jamie, have you looked? You're looking at the economic impact, but also too in terms of the consumer demand behind demanding high quality protein that hasn't been drenched.
Yeah, so we haven't looked specifically at that in the marketplace, but I think this is a really key thing that Carla's important for in the future, or moving into the future, is that it offers opportunities to provide animals that have been in a low input or a low chemical input system with less drenches and less reliance on drenches, and also the assurance or the extra peace of mind that it potentially gives around the negative impacts of parasites on your animals. Like I said earlier, if you make a minor error in judgment by a week or whatever, or someone doesn't get the message to drench something or drenches an individual or two wrongly, if they've got a good immune system against parasites, they should still be okay. And welfare is going to become a more and more important component of all consumer demand, I believe.
Sharon, maybe a question for you. Ginny Dodd-Dunsky wants to know, are these herds recording Carla more so in the North Island or the South Island?
They're all in the South Island currently.
Okay.
But now that the science is proven, we may get some more uptake.
In terms of
some of the genetics are available in the North Island.
This has only been an experimental, well, not experimental, but it's been a sort of a whether you're prepared to try it or not breeding value to date. So really, as of now, is only the official, I guess, confirmation that we are sure that it's a very positive thing to do and won't be detrimental to your other genetics plans. So you certainly couldn't go judging breeders for not having used it to date, because there were potential risks around their genetic program.
Okay, we've got a question about cost per test.
It's about $10 per animal sampled.
Okay. Calvin O'Hara would like to understand the full title when we're talking Carla. I know there's a lot of research out there, Calvin, that you could be Googling as well, but is there a brief summary for Calvin?
So I guess if we go back to that M&M slide, it is called the carbohydrate larval antigen. So those infective larvae, as I said, have this coating on their outside that protects them from the pasture and the world outside the animal. And it's an antibody response to that. So it's a generic antibody response essentially to any infective larvae that can be grazed up on pasture. And so it's not specifically larvae that are harmful, just larvae that are at that infective stage that can be grazed up. So it can be a totally non-specific a non-specific immune response if you've got a paddock full of, say, sheep larvae that won't do any harm to deer. If they ingest those, they will still acquire this Carla immune response.
Fantastic. Any further questions, feel free to send them through. We've got a couple more minutes. Pete Stratton, any idea of cost to test? Peter, yes, we've just answered that around the $10 mark. If you'd like to get Richard, it's fantastic. They're all sharing within the comments links to more information. I'll give you another couple of minutes to send some in because it's great to see these questions popping in. If you just bear with me, Jamie and Sharon, just to let you know that the Deer Industry Conference has been broken into 3 parts and we'll be back next Tuesday, the 7th of July, as well as the following Tuesday, 14th of July, from 1 o'clock in the same places on YouTube as well as Facebook and on the Deer Industry website. If you want to scroll down on the conference page, it's under Media tab. You can see who is presenting next week. We have Catherine Sayer on the velvet composition science that she has been working on, and Reese Griffiths will be giving us an overview on the velvet marketing, as well as joined by Ross Chambers, Tony Cochrane and Colin Stevenson for a Q&A. Phil McKenzie and Nick Taylor will be giving an overview on the P2P, the passion to profit, and Sarah and Millie Howell will be talking about the innovation group. Nicola McGruther and Hugh Jackson will be talking about the Rural Professionals Workshop, the success of that, and the Big Deer Tour, all with questions and answers. A very big session next Tuesday, 7th of July from 1 o'clock. So just giving you some time there in case there was any extra questions that needed to come through. We do. Has this research been peer-reviewed and published in any scientific journals yet? If so, which? And if not, what are the plans?
So the first paper to come out of this area, the second paper, so Colin McIntosh published in the old Cervid, the NZ Deer Branch, NZVA, quite a few years ago, the foundation research from this. The deer progeny test research is about to be published in the New Zealand Journal of Animal Science, so that's the stuff around whether or not it's heritable, and that NZ Journal of Animal Science is freely accessible to anyone, and that is literally days away from going live online. And then there is the further work which still needs to be published, but this has only just been reported to the deer industry. So to date, it has been reported to the deer industry and scientifically reviewed internally in Ag Research in terms of the report that has been issued to Deer Research.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jamie Warden, of course, joined there by Sharon McIntyre from our Deer Select Manager. And thank you all for being a wonderful audience, an engaged audience closer to the end there. So let's, now you know how this is all going to work, make sure that you head onto the Deer Industry website, add some of your questions there prior to, and we will see them in the Q&A. Thank you for taking the time to join us in the 2020 Deer Industry Conference, where the focus is on you. All of these presentations will be available within the next few days on the Deer Industry New Zealand YouTube channel, as well as podcast channel, and so you can share with your team and listen back on anything you may have missed. We would love your feedback on this format. Any issues you may have had, you can send them directly to me, sarah@puriummedia.com. And as I said, we're going to be back next Tuesday, the 7th of July, and the following Tuesday, the 14th of July, live right here on the Deer Industry YouTube and Facebook, as well as deerinNZ.org under Media, and then click on Conference. I'm Sarah Perium. I've been your MC for today's online conference. It's been absolutely engaging and wonderful news. As we said, a lot more where that came from next Tuesday. Let's do this all again next week. Have a wonderful rest of your week.